Hi, y'all. How are you? Fantastic. Hey, everybody. I am Jess Wiener, and I'm a cultural expert and founder and CEO of a cultural fluency agency called Talk to Jess. We work with the world's largest brands like Dove and Barbie to help them with better representation in media marketing, advertising, and workforce. But today I'm here wearing the hat of national board member for She Should Run. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with three incredible minds as we begin to debunk and get more inspired, I hope, around what we can do this election year. So with that, let me introduce you to my incredible panel today, starting with the founder and CEO of She Should Run, Erin Loos Cutraro. Yeah. Hey. And we're joined by Cici Rojas from Tico Productions and Abrima Erwiah from co-founder of Studio 189. And Abrima is also the director of the Brockman Institute of Fashion Biz at Parsons. So welcome this amazing panel. Let's just, I want to do a gut check really quick of everybody in the room. Yes. Kind of feel like I know what the answer is going to be, but show of hands, who's feeling a little anxious this election year? Hands and feet. Raise your hand if you're exhausted by political headlines. And how many of you are feeling tired of being underrepresented in our political system? Yes. I feel like I know I'm preaching to the choir, but also last question, raise your hand if you're feeling like you're not entirely sure what else you can do this year. Okay, that's where we're gonna ground today's conversation because Makers is such an incredible opportunity for conversation, resource, and action. We're gonna focus this conversation today on the panel on tangible steps that we can do, not just to stay sane and take our head out of the sand a bit for this year because we don't have the option. The title of this conversation is Inaction is not an option for election 2024. So we know you're not alone in those feelings. We've designed what I hope to be a robust conversation. And Erin, I want to start with you. Sure. As CEO and founder of She Should Run, can you ground us in a little bit of a state of affairs of where we're sitting right now, what we're up against, and also, is there anything good we can be looking forward to in this election year?
Ooh.
I know.
So I may not start with what's good.
That's okay.
Let's get to it first. I don't think I need to tell you all in this room just how tough it is for women right now, from the Dobbs decision to wage discrimination, childcare costs, increased violence against women, this all being that much harder for women of color. It's really tough. And I heard it earlier today, and I'll say it again, what's bad for women is bad for everyone. So the other piece of this that is important is that what's tough for women is tied to policy. And where policy is rooted is in politics. And right now we're facing, as you just saw with the hands, I have no surprise about all those hands in the air. What we're facing right now is mass exhaustion. Pew Center did a study last year that put numbers on it. They said that over 65% of Americans cite feeling exhausted by a conversation around politics. They use words like corrupt and crazy and confusing. We all know this to be true. What we also know to be true, though, is that since 1980, women have been the majority of registered voters and the majority of voters. We show up. However, right now there is a numbness that is operating in our politics that is unacceptable. We have to move beyond it. I'll share just a moment of what we see at She Should Run. So for those of you who don't know She Should Run, we are a national nonpartisan organization that works to help women see their potential in political leadership. So we do our work in a way that's really non-traditional in the political space. So you probably think of organizations that train women to run for office. What we do is we find women who are not thinking about running, and we offer resources, toolkits, courses that they can take to just put a toe in. because we know that we're never going to change who's on the ballot if women aren't getting started. And I'll give you one story, and then I'll pass the baton here, but to bring it home, there was a woman, she was supposed to be here today. Unfortunately, she's ill. Her name's Eileen Navarro. So she's actually a California resident. It's such a good example of the types of, I really consider them rays of joy, hundreds of thousands of women that access She Should Run's programs. Eileen was a teaching assistant. While she was teaching, there was a shooting in her classroom. And the experience paralyzed her, frankly. It made her feel like she had no idea what to do next. And things came together in that after this experience. It happened to be that She Should Run was hosting a conversation around the connection between gun violence and political leadership and what we can do about it. And a friend of Eileen said to her, I think you should go to this. And Eileen really explains this as she just felt like empty. She came to this, and it was the thing she needed to say, oh, I have this life experience that I can bring into community conversation. She went forward to do so much that many people wouldn't have the energy to do, but to start a leadership council in her town that is addressing issues just like gun violence to make her community better, and is now serving to help advise She Should Run programming. It's not always gonna be that quick of a light bulb, but here's what that took, and I'll leave it here, is it took somebody saying to Eileen, you have a voice in this conversation. Your voice is needed in this conversation. And it took resources being available for Eileen to tap into, and it changed everything. It changed how she steps up. And I hope that's where we land in this conversation, is folks just seeing the ways that their perspectives can really show up in these really necessary conversations.
I don't want to move totally off of the upside of this year, because I do think, I think we need to inject a little bit of maybe realistic optimism, but would you say what you just shared about Eileen's story is the potential for this year, that we may incentivize new voices into the political or civic leadership conversation? Like, what can we look forward to
we
this
have
year?
no choice.
Agreed.
Okay, yes. We will, and we have to. And I think it's why we're having the conversation with such incredible women, like those that are in this room here, is we have no other choice but to figure out what our role is to be part of the change.
Right. Cici, I want to talk about roles that everybody can play, because I want to make sure whether you're sitting in this room today feeling completely disheartened and disengaged, or whether you've got a fire in you and you're looking for some of that permission and community and connection. But I want to talk about the importance of community, especially during an election year, and how you in particular energize folks within the many organizations that you touch and your media company. Can you shed a little light on that?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I think, to Erin's point, I mean, inaction is not, that's why we're here. It's not something that we should even contemplate. But I do believe that all politics are local. I mean, there's truth to that. And what I mean by that is that you may not see yourself in a solution to some big overwhelming problem, but you are key to at least building some strategy in your community about how you might want to move the needle just at a small level. There's many roles you can play other than one, obviously running for office and winning. And I say you can either be the queen or the queen maker. There's a lot of value and power and influence in a queen maker. And so, and there's many roles you can play just in that regard, just getting involved in it doesn't even have to be a political campaign in terms of a candidate, but what issues are coming up, bond issues or anything that have an economic impact or a social impact on your community. One of the things that I'm seeing, especially now in the Latino community, there's some real grassroots efforts around local school board races and charter school boards. How do we impact our community? By creating better outcomes for our kids. How do we do that? By leadership. So those are a few small things. Obviously, then you can graduate and go to the metropolitan, the community college boards and commissions. And then the other route is appointments. Yes. So you can also make a big difference. And I talk to many, especially groups of color and women groups. It's great to advocate for appointments to social serving boards, but we also have to be at the economic development table boards. This tax increment financing, it might sound not sexy, but those are where decisions are being made that are going to impact our community and our ability to advance. So there's many roles that we can each play, even at the simple one step, and then before you know it, you've got a strategy built to how you move the community forward.
Abrima, in 2020, you launched a voter registration campaign with fellow designers and your co-founder, Rosario Dawson, called Studio 189, which, for those of you who don't know, is an artisan-produced fashion and lifestyle brand and social enterprise that supports various community-led projects in Africa and the US. The campaign united the fashion industry's most seminal forces to help empower at least 1 million first-time voter registration to head to the polls. Can you talk a little bit about, yes. I would love to hear a little bit about the learnings you have from engaging first-time voters and how important that is.
Yeah, so I want to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about Fashion Our Future and Studio 189. So in 2020, it was obviously a horrible year. But what happened, I talk a lot about fashion because we're all wearing clothes. Fashion's the #2 polluter in the world. Most women work in fashion and informal sectors, voices oftentimes are not counted, particularly women of color and in marginalized communities that are disenfranchised. And in 2020, we were crying. You know, there were a lot of groups that started forming of designers, very well-known designers, and they were on the phone crying, you know, about their business, about the state of the world, about what they could do. And then the death of Mr. George Floyd. And then it became this other conversation, particularly among groups of color, where we were watching the robberies in the store, and some of the news outlets were criminalizing the kids. And what I thought was really interesting is that designers wanted to get involved. They weren't criminalizing them, and it was their stores that were being robbed. They were like, what can we do to help? How do we get involved in this conversation? And so a lot of what we tried to do is figure out how do we meet people where they're at, and that's what we're doing, right? And so I called Rosario, who has Voto Latino, which is the largest organization for registering Latinx voters, and she said, one, they had started National Voter Registration Day in September, which is Fashion Week, so perfect. And two, that we needed to register voters. Like, we needed to move from what we were seeing to like getting you to register and then moving you to vote. And so what we did is we galvanized, like Virgil Abloh got involved before he passed from Off-White, Tanya Taylor, a lot of designers got involved, and we started making products because kids like products, right? Like, sort of like fashion, we started posting it through their websites and sharing information, and also making it very easy, QR codes on the t-shirts, text to register, and also collaborating with a company called Action Button. It was like one click, you read an article, you find it, you can immediately talk to your legislator about issues that you care about in the places where you are. So it was really about meeting people where we had a concert. I mean, we did the whole thing. And so that's what we did with Fashion Our Future. I know that time is of the essence, so can I quickly also talk about CY9?
Please.
The other thing about fashion that I think is interesting along the lines of why it matters is that, you know, when we started Studio 189, which is based between here and West Africa, it was about using fashion as an agent of social change. I had been to the DRC, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, you know, where rape and sexual violence are used as weapons of war with V-Day and Dr. Mukwege. And you see so many women who have been through so much trauma, but they make things and they take the proceeds, they send their kids to school, and they borrow from line, and it's just so powerful to see what happens when you empower women. So in 2012, Eve Ensler said 1 in 3 women will be raped and sexually violated. And what we said is that fashion could rise, and fashion could be an agent of social change. So if we looked at the supply chain and all the different steps in the value chain, from raw materials throughout the whole process, building circular systems, what could we do to impact change? Because underneath all of that is all these other industries, agriculture, oil and gas, maternal health care, education, and all these different systems that most people, when we're buying our clothes, are not thinking about, but that are directly impacted in that supply chain. And so that's what we try to do, is basically meet you there and say, what can we do to change that? And that leads us in the end to policy like the Fashion Act, because, you know, we can create tools, we can look for resources, but then the goalpost keeps moving and it keeps moving, and the legislation isn't there. Big companies come, with amazing promises, but how does a small company compete with that? How do you define sustainability? What is the criteria for sustainability? Will we have a planet in 5 years? How many t-shirts can we consume? One t-shirt is 2 years of drinking water. What's more important, the t-shirt or the water? And so we try to think about that and then push you towards using your voice for things like the Fashion Act or the Fabric Act that protects workers' rights. And these are all new legislations that are passing, but also showing you that with your voice, you can also impact change in communities that are oftentimes disenfranchised.
Yes.
Get that in there.
So this is why, one of the reasons, many reasons why I was so excited to have this conversation, because as you can hear from Abrima and Cici and Erin, everybody can intersect in our civil discourse through different means and methods of the things that both inspire us and things that we can learn about, right? Fashion as an epicenter from all of the issues that we want to talk about that you just rattled off. So Erin, I want to come back to you because I know if we tune too much into social media, mainstream media, we're focused a lot on the November election, but I want to talk about the significance of civic engagement beyond the national election, such as engaging in down-ballot races. We have a primary coming up here in California on March 5th. How do we support folks through community engagement, not just elections? Because this is the bigger story that we're trying to tell today.
Yeah, it's so important, Jess. Look, the November election or whatever upcoming election there is will be the lead headline. That will be what is of conversation. And the reality is that civic engagement and strength of democracy depends on regular engagement. And so many of us have sort of gotten into the habit of politics becoming more like hobbyism. Where we feel like we need to be really informed on the headlines and really informed on when the day is happening, but what are you actually doing between now and the day? And so let's talk about what some of those things are, because they're things that we can all do. And of course, the things that come top to mind for me aren't all of the things you can do, but one is think locally. Cici, you said this, think about who is working to represent your neighborhood, your community. Adopt a candidate. I always say, go find that candidate who is probably running a campaign out of their kitchen. Offer to make calls, offer to do some door knocking. I'm talking about hours of your time that could fundamentally make a huge difference for somebody who's trying to be a voice for your community. A second one that I always say is be the person who has the answers. How many of you you probably won't raise your hands, it's fine. Just quiet, invisible hands for a minute. You've shown up to go vote, and I will admit to this, and you're like, what is that? Something that's on your ballot that you didn't know was gonna be on your ballot. It's something that's local, you're not sure who the person is, you're not sure what the question that's being asked is. You can do such a tremendous service for those around you by right now looking up what's gonna be on your ballot and be the person that does the research. You don't have to tell people how to vote. You can tell them where they can go to get that same information. If you feel very strongly, you can tell them how to vote. But what you're doing is you're being the person that can help answer the questions that most people don't have the answers to. And then the third thing I would say is use your wallet. So, campaigns are run with dollars, nonprofits are run with dollars, causes are changes made with dollars. If you're not giving to someone or something you believe in, change that, commit to change that. Because even small dollars, and I always say, give small dollars regularly, Put it on autopilot, you don't have to think about it all the time, it just shows up and you are making a tremendous difference. So those are three things that come to mind. There's so many other things we can do.
I want to dig into that a little bit too, Cici, blending the financial giving and the opportunity to build in community, right? So maybe you put on your hat right now as board member of the YMCA USA as an example, and talk a little bit about how if folks in the room are considering how to better support their communities financially. I think a lot of people often worry that what they give is not enough. And Erin talked about giving small amounts more regularly, but maybe we can talk about that tie a little bit more.
Right, and so I think you're absolutely correct. There are great spaces that we can raise our hand often and become a leader or start gaining some influence so that you can be an important voice at the table. And yes, it's a financial investment, of course. If you feel passionately about purpose of a particular organization, for me it's the why, and for others, and you're aligned with them, then it's not just about the personal investment financially, but it's the time. Yeah. It's your network. It's all the other skill sets that you can bring to the table, and not just for you, but what I try to do is I try to bring others with me and create room at the table for more voices that will enable us to get further faster. But and everybody has a passion in this room, I'm sure, of organizations that they feel like they can become aligned with, that are community catalysts for greater good. And so I've spent a lot of time obviously in that space, but for me and even for our company, we definitely, I encourage everybody on my team to pick an organization. I'd like it to be aligned with what we do, but if it's passion, whether it's animal welfare, what have you. But the most important thing is that there are great friendships and relationships that happen around these board tables or in these organizations that you can build upon to make that change that you want to see in your community.
I think, look, everybody sitting in this room understands relationships are the currency of business. That's a huge reason why we're here, the relationships that we're forming. You've all talked very explicitly about collaboration and community being a key ingredient here. We're going to wrap up in a second. And I was hoping maybe to go down, Abrima, starting with you, from your perspective where you sit, things that we want to leave this room with today, a tactical, practical takeaway that you would want somebody to walk out thinking about today.
I like it when it works way down here. I think sometimes the conversations are very up here, and a lot of people feel like they're cut out because they're worried about what are they going to eat tomorrow, like healthcare. Like, can I pay the next bill? And so disconnected from this conversation that it's. So to me, I like things like this, like Circle that we did and all these types of projects, the projects that you're working on, but the ones where we take the time to really, one at a time, meet with people and build the opportunities and the path and make them understand how it resonates with their needs as opposed to our needs for them, but also drawing those connections between their needs and how it impacts their lives specifically so they can take action. And then they can take action in their community, and then they spread it to the next community, and then the next community, and it kind of grows like a spider web, as opposed to kind of trying to control it from the top, but letting it kind of build up from the bottom.
Yes. Beautiful.
So letting people have agency over their own lives, basically.
Yes. Cici, what would you add?
I think for me, it's really simple. I'd say it's just a matter of saying yes more than you say no. Really raising your hand and taking a leadership role. That's, for me, it's been, and not just for me, others that I know, and I've watched them gain either success in business or just in civic leadership roles. It's because they said yes more than they said no.
Erin, I know we have a couple, this is not where the conversation ends for us if you're interested in continuing it, but do you want to talk about some tactical opportunities this group has to engage?
Absolutely. So in your Makers app, we have built a tool for you. I wanted to really give thought to how we flip the script on these doom and gloom conversations around politics so we can all be part of change. And so we've done the work for you to create both some tactics and some talking points for you to move a conversation from that spin where you feel powerless to a place where you are sharing what you are doing. What are you doing? And that what you are doing, I just want to come back to. It can be giving a couple of hours here and there. When you walk into a room and you start talking about that, you will be the catalyst that makes somebody else think about their role in our democracy. So I encourage you to take a look at that, and we have a workshop that's happening at 1:30 too.
Yes, Erin's going to continue talking about ways to engage in your community, and we're excited to announce from this stage today that over the next course of 6 or 8 months, She Should Run, powered by Makers, is going to be able to offer 30-minute community calls for action, where we're going to be featuring more exciting speakers and experts to talk about the issues affecting women, how do we continue to carve our role in this election season, and specifically ways to continue to build this community conversation, because clearly it doesn't end today. So we're so excited to have kicked this off with you. Thanks for your time, and thank you all for your wisdom.
You got it.